All right, we are officially recording. Welcome, everyone, to this Southern Vermont Young Professionals event. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Alyssa to do introductions.
Okay. Thanks, Casey. Hi, everybody. Oh, it's so weird because not everybody has a video, so that always throws me off a little bit. But my name's Alyssa, and I am on the Southern Vermont Young Professional Steering Committee. And I want to introduce you all to Mike Clough, who is the program director at the Southern Vermont Natural History Museum. If you haven't ever been up to the museum, it's located on Hogback on Route 9, so at the 100-mile view where there's the big pull-off, and it's across from the Beer Naked Brewing Company and pizza. The museum is in the gift shop building, so if you haven't ever been up there, I highly recommend you stop by sometime. And we asked Mike if he could do a presentation for us tonight about Vermont wildlife, and it's a pretty small group. I think it's probably going to stay a pretty small group. So if you have questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and just kind of ask questions as we go, or if you're not comfortable with that, if you want to put them in the chat box, I can monitor the chat box and ask them for you. And I'll turn it over to Mike.
All right. So good evening, everyone. As Alyssa just gave the great introduction to kind of introduce the museum. If you are familiar with the Scenic Overlook and you're thinking of that gift shop Alyssa just mentioned, and you're wondering where did they hide a museum up there, we have the downstairs of that gift shop, which is actually below road grade. So because of that big Scenic Overlook, you can't see it. But then we also connect to the 3-story building next door. Yeah, again, that road grade, right? So you can only see that little, it looks like a little tiny white building. That's 3 stories tall. And we house the largest collection of native birds and mammals in Vermont, the 3rd largest in New England, actually. Only Yale and Harvard have more examples of native birds and mammals than we have. Now, those are a historic taxidermy collection. So this is a collection of dead birds and mammals, unfortunately. Not everybody loves that. So over the years, we've added other exhibits, among them live animal exhibits. And typically our educational programs are focused around those live animals. Obviously, we're not going into schools or libraries right now. So we are trying to do some of these online versions. And as Alyssa said, if you have any questions, please don't be shy. I have the chat room open. I should be able to read it as we get going along. And especially with a small group, you all feel free to drive here. You know, don't hesitate to make this more of a conversation than a lecture necessarily. That said, I do have a bunch of live animals here. And just like our dead animals at the museum, the live animals we have are things that are native to the Northeast. A couple examples that are representative of native wildlife. We'll meet a cute and fuzzy one of those today. But for the most part, we're talking about animals that you and I could go outside this afternoon or tomorrow morning and actually see these wild animals out here in this beautiful place where we all live. So why don't we get started with one that a couple months ago we could not see. An animal that actually, if we had gone out last winter and dug down in the snow and pulled one of these little guys out of the ground, we probably would have thought it was dead. We're going to show you an animal that actually freezes solid in the wintertime. This is nothing you all want to try yourselves. Freezing solid is super bad for you. But these little guys do it every year. Everybody? I'm just sticking him on a stick here. This is also the tiniest thing I'm going to show you all today. We'll switch to bigger animals here pretty quick. There you go. Thanks, buddy. So you see that little critter we have right there? That is a gray tree frog. And the gray tree frog is one of 3 frogs we have in the Northeast that do not spend the winter at the bottom of the pond. These little guys spend the winter buried underground, just below the surface, well above the frost line. So they actually do freeze solid. And right now, folks at lower elevations here in Southern Vermont, like any of you in Brattleboro or myself, I live in Putney. I heard one of these guys just last night. These little frogs are starting to call. Now what that means is the males, like this one, let's turn him around there. You don't need to look at his butt. These males are getting ready to try to impress the girls. And they do that by being loud. And you hear this loud kind of a kind of call. That's these guys. That's these gray tree frogs. Pretty soon, the American toads are going to start calling too. And they're real similar. It just goes on and on and on and on. So it's much more drawn out than the little kind of chirp almost of this guy. He insists on looking at me instead of you. You'll notice too, if you can see his toes there, gray tree frogs have a bunch of cool adaptations. This little guy has suction cups on his feet. He can climb glass if he wants to. Goes right up a tree, no problem. And that's really where they do spend most of their time. They're up in the trees, actively hunting, looking for moths and other insects up there in the branches. And we'll be able to hear them call right into the summer. And a lot of times it sounds like they're up in the tree, and that's where they are. And again, if any of you folks have questions, please do not be shy.
Mike, how do you know that he's male?
How do we know he's male? Well, we can guess based on his size. With frogs, the girls are bigger, which you actually see with a surprising number of animals. But then also, if we look underneath him, I'm going to show us underneath here, buddy. I don't know if you see there that yellow under his legs. That's a good sign that he's a male. That bright yellow color is actually considered a defensive thing. You know, so if he's sitting up in a tree and a blue jay comes along and happens to spot him, I mean, he's got great camouflage. I mean, he's really bark colored. No, he's going to come over the top instead. But his great camouflage there is going to help protect him. But say something comes along and spots him anyway. If he jumps and flashes that yellow, they call it a startle color. We'll see quite a few animals have it. Some of you might have seen the little red belly snakes or ringneck snakes we have around here. They have the same thing. They're camouflaged above, brightly colored below. And the thought is that sudden flash of color makes that predator stop and go, whoa, what was that? You know, imagine you sit down to breakfast and all of a sudden your pancakes flash blue. You're going to go, whoa, what was that? And maybe your pancakes are going to get to escape. And that's the idea with these frogs. They flash that yellow and that predator goes, wait, what was that? And they can get away. So, want to see something a little bigger? I can only see two of you, so it's all Casey and Alyssa. You guys are the face of the audience. So I'm seeing some.
We'll give you a yes. Oh, there we go. Now we got another person.
Joining us. All right. That has been the weirdest thing about the live streaming programs, because when we're out at an event or library or whatever, we get to see the people and you get that back and forth. It's very different here in this digital format. But let's see somebody big. Yeah, let's see somebody real big. Hey, someone else. Thanks, Zachary. Here, buddy. All right. Last second, I decided we'll take the food chain perspective. Because here we have a barred owl. And the barred owl and the tree frog do not live together, because we'd end up with just the barred owl, by the next morning. We always think of owls as eating mice. A barred owl is definitely a rodent hunter, but especially, in the spring and summer, you'll see these guys all along waterways. They hear those frogs calling, like we mentioned with the gray tree frog, and it's like a dinner bell. They'll come right in and eat frogs and salamanders at the water's edge. Very opportunistic predator. They're not, they're not real picky eaters. So whatever they can find, they're going to catch. Now I should mention with this owl, this is one of our barred owls. You'll notice her wing is hanging down there. It's always like that. This bird, like all of the animals we have here at the museum, is here for a reason. With our birds of prey, they're all handicapped in some way. Like this one was hit by a car, it broke her wing, it damaged her eye and damaged her foot. And none of those injuries healed correctly. And any one of them really would keep her from surviving in the wild. They need their wings, obviously, for flying, to evade their own predators, also to get to their prey. Their feet is what they use to catch that prey. Here's a foot. Get a little closer look at that one. You notice those big claws there. Those are the talons. that is the reason we call an owl, a hawk, a falcon, or an eagle. It's the reason we call them raptors, or these feet. That actually comes from a Latin word, which actually means to seize or to grab. And that's how an owl is going to catch that mouse or frog or whatever it's after. It's going to grab it with its feet. Now, we might see another bird, like a robin or a heron that's hunting. They're using their beak to hunt. For an owl or a hawk, any of the raptors, their beak is more silverware. Can you show them that beak, buddy? There she goes. It doesn't look like an owl's beak is very big because their heads are so fluffy, but it is sharp. That beak is like a knife for cutting her food up if she gets something too big to swallow. Again, you all have questions. Don't be shy. Bring them in. The eyes, of course, are important for an owl too. You got to see. An owl eyes are pretty impressive. You notice right away they're big. This bird weighs about 2 pounds. Her eyeballs are almost as big as mine. Her eyes are so big, the muscle structure she'd need to move those eyes isn't cost effective. So instead, owls have a thin bone that holds that eye in place. So like right now, you notice she turned her head. For an owl to look around, it has to turn its head. They can't move their eyes like we do. Part of it is because those eyes just are so huge. It doesn't make sense for a bird to have the weighty muscle structure you need to move those around, or really the bone you need to anchor those muscles. So instead, their eyes are fixed in their socket, fixed, locked forward. Owls have great binocular vision, terrible peripheral vision. They also, as you might expect, have great night vision. They estimate the best of the owls have night vision a little bit better than a cat, and they think a cat has the best night vision a mammal eye is able to achieve. Give you an idea, some of the examples that get thrown around is this bird could fly through the woods by starlight without hitting a tree. Yeah, try running through the woods by starlight. No, don't do that.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So I've been seeing a fair amount of barred owls in the woods lately, all during the day. Is it usual for them to be out in the day all year round, or is it special about spring that they're out more now?
Well, owls are totally able to function during the day. I mean, they still see better than we do in broad daylight. Probably where they fall behind us is color vision. And this time of year, they're working hard to get food for their kids. The youngsters are pretty big now. We're actually, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are starting to jump out of the nest even. So they require a lot of food. So mom and dad are probably working some extra shifts. The other time we expect to see them out during the day is in the winter time. Because again, just life is that much harder in the winter time. So they're gonna have to be out a little more. The biggest challenge owls have during the day, they kind of have two big issues that are all tied to the same thing. Owl feathers are very soft. It gives them silent flight, actually. But imagine a soft canoe paddle. You're not going to go real fast, right? Owls are not very fast flyers. They're not very maneuverable. So in the daytime, just that physical moving through space to get to a mouse, they're at a disadvantage compared to a faster bird like say a hawk. And then at the same time, all the other birds are faster than they are. So a great way, actually, you may have seen this if you've been seeing owls out during the day. A lot of times how we know there's an owl there is you hear the commotion of the other birds, right? There's chickadees smacking that owl in the back of the head, or blue jays screaming at it. Crows are famous for their dislike of owls. And there's really not much an owl can do to get away from those other birds. Now, a barred owl is big enough. Not many birds really want to go toe to toe with her. She's strong enough. If that crow gets within reach, that crow's in big, big trouble. But if she can't get it, it's going to be hard for her to get a hold of it. So those two things make daytime, not really ideal for most owls. You see the owls who are normally active during the day, like a snowy owl or a burrowing owl down south. You get down to Florida, you see those cute little burrowing owls. They have hard feathers. So they're not as quiet as let's say a normal owl, but they are much faster. They are much more maneuverable. See what happens when you ask questions? I just blah, 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 blah. So feel free to keep those questions coming.
Yeah, thanks for the answer.
Yeah, no problem. And let's see, we've got some more critters. I mean, we do an hour-long owl program. So we could keep going on owls, or we could come back to the owl if y'all are interested a little later. I think we might want to see something a little more up close, right? What do you think? Yeah? Oh, let's get him out of the way. Any of you nervous about snakes? No? Good. Sarah, I hope you're okay. I can't see your reaction. We were doing this with Cub Scouts. We were doing a program with some Cub Scouts, and I didn't ask that question, and I just pulled the snake out. And all of a sudden, like, there was chaos and people diving away from the cameras. And this is a native snake. This is an eastern or black rat snake. A friend of mine up in Pittsford, Vermont just sent me a picture of one she saw hiking that was at least as big as this guy. The eastern rat snake is our largest snake in the Northeast. She can grow to be about 8 feet long. This one is a little over 5 feet, which is a good size. That's a full adult snake. This one was someone's pet over in New York State. They got sick of her, which is the norm for pet snakes. Most people get sick of them and get rid of them. They gave her to a nature center, and again, in upstate New York. Those folks decided that the woman who ran the program, her actual quote was, "I want to be the crazy crow lady of upstate New York." This is not a crow, so came to live with us. But rat snakes are really a neat snake. In general, snakes are very helpful animals. When you get into these big guys, like a big rat snake, that's especially true from just our selfish human perspective. It's hard to find a more helpful animal. They don't make a mess, they don't make any noise, and all she really wants to do is eat mice and rats. You know, really, rodents are the #1 item on this snake's menu. She's out there looking for rodents to eat. They love farmland, places like that, where we really don't want rodents usually. So they're a very helpful animal. And again, they're not ever looking for trouble. When you do encounter a snake, very often, you know, obviously they're afraid. We're big, we're scary. Even this snake, when she's 8 feet long, she's still only this tall. You know, her head is well below your foot level. So they do tend to get a little nervous. Some of them will do the best defense is a good offense. The eastern rat snake thinks the best defense is to convince you she's a rattlesnake. Yeah, rattlesnake. They'll coil up. She'll flatten out her head, try to make it look like she has a big triangular head, like a rattlesnake. She'll buzz her tail really fast. Now, she doesn't have a rattle or anything. See that tail end? But if it's down in the leaves or drumming against something, it kind of sounds like a rattlesnake, which is a great defense against a coyote, right? Or a raccoon. Terrible defense against us. Another local snake who does that is the milk snake. And every few years, we'll get a call here at the museum from someone who has just killed a rattlesnake, and they want to know what they should do. And through further discussion, so far, they've all actually been milk snakes. That get scared, it does that tail buzz, and people kind of freak out. You know, we run away and we come back with a shovel kind of thing. So even those venomous snakes, though, and in New England, we do have 2 venomous snake species. We have timber rattlesnakes, and then we also have the eastern copperhead, or northern copperhead rather. And the copperheads aren't that far from us here in southern Vermont. You get down into Massachusetts, 45 minutes or so, and you start running into copperheads. With the warming trends and with the Connecticut River Valley really being, or historically has been one of the main routes that new reptiles and amphibians come into Vermont. I mean, we'll probably see copperheads here eventually. And then over in the western part of the state, we have the timber rattlesnakes. Both those very mild-mannered snakes. You know, if you got to live with venomous snakes, pick those two. Mellow snakes. Questions, or I'll keep talking.
Mike, how long will a snake like this live either in the wild and in captivity?
So in captivity, this snake can live over 20 years if they get well taken care of. Most snakes, though, are going to die when they're young. You know, when they're this big, they have a lot of predators out there. Once she gets to be adult size, though, you know, this snake really doesn't have much for successful predators. She's going to be pretty safe once she gets 4 or 5 feet long. What their actual lifespan in the wild is, though, I'm not sure. Life is tough out there, so I would expect it's not 20 years. But you look at turtles, and very often a turtle's lifespan is much longer in the wild than it is in captivity. Mm-hmm. Who knows? You know, you look at quality of care in captivity for snakes, you know, maybe it isn't giving them something they can get in the wild that results in longer lives. But honestly, I'm not really sure what the out in the wild records are. She's doing something a lot here. I just want to show you guys. You notice that tongue? Yeah. Everybody thinks snakes are rude. That's not what that is. She's not sticking her tongue out. No. Snakes have a specialized sense. We don't have really. They're using something called a Jacobson's organ, where basically the same way like we have the nerves in our sinuses, when we inhale air up into those sinuses, those nerves process the smells. The snake sticks her tongue out, grabs those same little, let's call them smell particles out of the air, pulls them back into her mouth, sticks them up in that Jacobson's organ, and it has the nerves that pretty much identify the smells the same way our sinuses do. I'm going to sneeze with all this talk about sinuses. Hold on. All right, I'm good. That tongue-oriented sense of smell for a snake is better than most dogs. So she can tell us apart by smell. They've done studies where rattlesnakes can identify the individual mouse they bit, trail it through a crowd of other mice without getting distracted. It can tell that individual mouse and follow it while the venom kills it. No reason to believe this snake couldn't do the same thing. However, when a rat snake is hunting, you know, they're not a wimpy little venomous snake that goes bite, don't scratch me. They're a constrictor. So just like a boa constrictor and anaconda, she's going to grab on with her mouth. Snakes have very tiny little sharp teeth, pretty weak jaws really, but enough for her to hold on while she wraps her body around and is going to squeeze that rat, let's say, or that mouse just trying to eat. Now, you guys who just joined in, hi, Amanda. If you all have questions, don't be shy. Feel free to ask any questions you might have.
We just missed what kind of snake that is that you're holding.
Yeah, this is an eastern or black rat snake. And these guys are here in Vermont. They are a threatened species. You only really find them, well, in the western part of the state, like Middlebury area is where you're most likely to find them. Again, they like to imitate rattlesnakes, which is not a great defense against people. And they also overwinter with rattlesnakes. So back in the late 1800s, we figured out that all the rattlesnakes in town would go to the same spot and spend the winter kind of piled up on top of each other. And sometime in the middle of the winter, someone would show up with a stick of dynamite and just blow that hibernaculum up and kill all those snakes. And in the process, take out rat snakes, milk snakes, and all the other snakes that were in there, which is fantastic if you were a rat in that town. Is to get rid of those snakes if you're a mouse or a rat. Okay, you guys, good job on the snakes. Nobody recoiled. I didn't see anyone go, ew, gross. Excellent. Because really they are very helpful animals to have around, and they do get a lot of bad press that personally I don't think they deserve. I think they kind of ended up getting cast as the bad guy in too many stories, I think. Oh, go ahead.
You said that they're more commonly found on the western side of the state. What are the snakes more common to find, like around Brattleboro and things like that?
Sure. Well, the snake you are definitely most likely to see, hands down, would be the eastern garter snake. And that's that dark snake with yellow stripes, or yellow snake with dark stripes, however you want to look at it. And that's a real common backyard snake. But I mean, really, we have a lot of different snakes. You can find red belly snakes and ringneck snakes that are adorable. I mean, a big ringneck snake's about that long. Let's see, we have ribbon snakes that are very similar to the garter snake. Water snakes, which is probably the snake most likely to bite you out of all the snakes that live in Vermont. Doesn't really do any harm, you know, little teeny teeth, weak jaws, but they have that whole bluff defense. Who am I missing? Milk snakes are a great snake to have around. They're another good rodent eater. And I'm missing a couple. Oh, black racers, which looks a lot like that black rat snake. Can be found in the Connecticut River Valley. Yeah. Those are going to be the biggest.
Mike?
Yes.
What's the biggest snake you have there?
That one, actually.
That's a big one?
Yeah. Yeah, we actually have this past, I don't know, couple months, we've been offered a ball python and boa constrictor. The ball python won't actually get as long as that rat snake, but the boa constrictor could have grown to be 12 feet or so. Since our focus is Vermont first, New England second, North America third, we didn't take either of those, that or that South American snake. All right, let's see someone cute and fuzzy. There we go. All right. So I should tell you, full disclosure, this is not a wild rabbit. This is a domestic rabbit. Wild rabbits, we have two different wild rabbits that live in Vermont. We have the snowshoe hare, who's about the same size as this rabbit. And then we also have the eastern cottontail. It's quite a bit smaller than this one, but they both look kind of similar this time of year. The snowshoe hare, of course, is also called the varying hare, and they change color in the winter. As the days get shorter, a brown varying hare would turn white. And then in the spring, as the days get longer, that white sheds out and is replaced with brown. The downside to timing it by length of day is if we have a year with late snow, the rabbits turn white anyway. If we have an early thaw, they're still white, and vice versa. You know, early snow, they're still brown. Snow late in the year, they've already turned brown. So they can run into some trouble, especially as climate gets a little erratic. Makes it a lot harder for those snowshoe hare to stay in sync with when there's snow cover. Both of those rabbits, the snowshoe hare and the eastern cottontail, have more in common with each other really than they do with this guy. Are domestic rabbits, and that's every domestic rabbit you've ever seen. Whether it's a little tiny spotted one that you carry in your pocket or one of these big 40-pound ones like you see at the retreat farm. Every one of those domestic rabbits are descended from the European rabbit, which is kind of similar to our cottontail. One of the biggest differences, though, is those European rabbits are tunnelers. You know, like watership adults. Yeah, watership down. Have you ever read that story? Yeah, right? So the warren, the burrowing rabbits, our rabbits don't do that. So there's no cottontail warren under your hedge. You know, we're not going to go up on top of the mountain and find tunnels dug by snowshoe hare. If this rabbit were out living in the wild, she would dig tunnels. And that's her thing because of that ancestry of the European rabbit. We have this rabbit for kind of a weird story, and I wanted to bring her today because her mom is actually a Brattleboro girl. Yeah. Her mom was found walking along the river a couple years ago by some folks who were out fishing. They right away were like, wait a minute, that's not a wild rabbit. They caught her. They knew one of the museum volunteers, contacted that person. They tried to find the owner, failed on the owner. The rabbit went to our volunteer with the intention of bringing it to us. When this rabbit's mom showed up here at the museum, all of our animals pretty much have to do programs, right? So you have to be able to do this with a rabbit. And her mom wasn't having it. Scratching, hissing, growling. Rabbits do growl. Very upset rabbit. tearing me all up with her claws. Luckily, the volunteer who had brought her into us had also fallen in love with that rabbit. And when I was like, I don't think she's going to work for the museum, that family was like, great, hooray, we want her, we want her. So they brought the rabbit home, they got her all set up, and the next day she had 5 babies. And I went, whew, dodge that. This is one of those babies, though. Now all grown up. She's little Miss Nut Brown here. She's adorable. And when you look at her, you can see, though, she has the same adaptations our wild rabbits have. And just like the snake gets a bad rap, a lot of times I feel like we underestimate the rabbit. Right? I mean, I bring the rabbit out and everybody's always like, oh, it's so cute. Can I kiss it? Right? Think how tough you have to be a rabbit. Wild rabbits out there in the woods have everything trying to eat them. I mean, really, if it eats meat, it probably eats rabbits. But still, there are rabbits. Still, they're running around all over the world. In some places, they actually cause trouble because they are such great survivors. If a rabbit turns up someplace where the predators don't know how to catch rabbits, they can explode. They can take the place over. Australia is probably the most famous case of that, where European rabbits, or cousins, just are a disaster. Part of it is, I mean, we can go into that if you guys want to. Part of that is you look at a rabbit and it is built to get away. Those big eyes on the side of her head give her a huge field of view. Actually, right now, I can see her eyes. So she can see at least my shoulders, and she can see the screen and everything to the side of her. Huge field of view. Those big ears can rotate independently. She can listen to 2 things at once. Rabbits are also very fast. Those little eastern cottontails you guys might see in your backyard, they can keep up with a horse for a short distance. They can keep up with a horse on the sprint. But their best trick is while they're running full speed, say they've got a bobcat coming up behind them. While those rabbits are running full speed, they can change direction without slowing down. Really think about that. That's a pretty cool trick. If you ski or bike ride or anything, imagine going as fast as you possibly can. Let's say you're riding your bike and you crank that steering wheel hard while you're going as fast as you can. What happens? I see some head shake.
Not good.
Yeah, you like roll, right? You crash. Not if you're a rabbit. So she can change direction at full speed, and maybe that bobcat will crash. Because it has, like the rest of us, the bobcat has to slow down to make that turn. So great defenses, and of course the rabbit's ultimate defense. The one that really makes it trouble when it's in a land without predators is they are really good at making more rabbits. Yeah, it's like they're famous for it, right? They are really good at that. We used to call it, do you remember those old Doritos commercials? Eat all you want, we'll just make more. You guys remember those? Yeah, we're borderline in the 80s.
A little bit, yeah.
But yeah, eat all you want, we'll just make more. That's the rabbit's ultimate defense. Predators can just eat rabbits all day long and they will replace them. So you bring them to a place like Australia, where the predators who are able to tackle a rabbit don't know how to deal with a rabbit. They're producing young as if they were getting eaten by foxes and hawks and weasels and everybody else. So very quickly, they can overpopulate an area. Rabbits are responsible for something like 45% of the extinct and endangered species in Australia. Rabbits responsible for that. Pretty incredible. Any questions out there? I feel like I've been jabbering for a while.
So I have a question. Mike, what kinds of raptors would eat a full-size rabbit?
The big ones. Like say let's say a snowshoe hare. It's going to be about the same size as this rabbit. A gray horned owl would probably be the one most likely to go after it. And even then, it's not flying away with that rabbit. It might be able to kill it and eat as much as it can, but it's not going to be able to fly away with it. maybe a big red-tailed hawk during the day, or a bald eagle might, even though bald eagles are much more water focused. But they could definitely take a rabbit if they could catch it. Yeah.
Okay.
And the little cottontails, all the bigger raptors are going to make a living on them.
So like the barred owl, would the barred owl eat a cottontail?
Yeah, a big cottontail might be more than a barred owl wants to go after, but definitely a little one.
So in places where you get these invasive species, you know, how do these places deal with that? Like, or do they, you know, like?
Well, Australia is probably the most famous example. And initially, one rancher, gentleman from England, he bought a ranch in Australia and missed rabbit hunting. And this is believed to be the primary source of the rabbit plague that now is in Australia. So he had a buddy of his send him some rabbits so he could let them go on his ranch and go rabbit hunting. And he was really the only thing hunting rabbits. So very quickly, those rabbits started to overpopulate. And because in Australia, everything's a marsupial, the birth rates tend to be a lot slower than a rabbit or like a placental mammal, you know, us or a mouse or a rabbit. So these guys could outbreed all their competition for food. And also rabbits will eat just about anything. There's over 400 species of plant that we know rabbits eat. Yeah, so they're not picky when it comes to their salad. So pretty quickly people realized this was a problem. And so they figured out, well, we need predators. So they imported foxes. And the foxes pretty quickly figured out it's a lot easier to catch a little wallaroo or something than it is to catch a rabbit. So they didn't have the impact on rabbits that had been hoped, but they did have a big impact on a lot of the native marsupials. They built a fence across Australia to try to stop them. The Great Australian Rabbit Fence, that didn't work, you know, burrows, so they were able to get under the fence. The thing that ended up significantly working is they introduced diseases into the population. Biological warfare is what has worked in Australia. They've introduced a couple really nasty diseases, and because the rabbits aren't marsupials, they've picked diseases that don't jump into the marsupials. But that's been, I mean, that's an ugly way to win the fight, but that's been the thing that has made the most progress. And even then, it's a never-ending battle. The rabbits will never be gone from Australia. And I mean, there's open season on them. You know, people go and shoot them whenever they get a chance.
Thank you.
You said that the eastern cottontail and the snowshoe hare, they don't do warrens like the European rabbits do. How do they, like, do they have nests or do they dig, or what do they do for?
Talk about how tough a rabbit is, right? Think about winter. This time of year, they dig little scrapes, like little shallow nests that they'll have their babies in. And it's not to say they won't use someone else's burrow, or they won't get under a log, something like that. But yeah, for the most part, they're sleeping in the bushes, you know, or they're digging these little shallow depressions to hide in. Sometimes people will come across, like, especially the cottontails, because they do very well in like a suburban environment. You know, especially they love that back lawn with a hedgerow, with a back lawn, with a patch of woods, with a back lawn, with a hedgerow. They love that habitat, especially if you've got a garden in the backyard there, every couple of backyards. And so people will find them when they're out mowing their lawns in the spring, because they'll have just this little shallow spot in the edge of the lawn, and you find them that way. Let's see another animal. This is actually an animal that last year I had to have all these qualifiers as to why this was not a Vermont animal, but there's some pretty strong evidence now that we have box turtles in one part of the state, and it's the part you guys live in. Yeah, that southeastern corner of Vermont. There's some pretty good evidence now that we historically had box turtles. In the occasional sightings that have been found in Vermont, they're all really like Putney south along the Connecticut River Valley. In the past, those turtles had been considered released pets because you can buy them in a pet store in New Hampshire. But now that's being second guessed, and the main reptile folks here in the state are very eager to find evidence of baby box turtles in southeastern Vermont, because that really will be the final piece of evidence you need to say these animals are here. So I thought I'd bring him out just so you know what to look for. The box turtle is different from all of our other turtles in the state because he's really a land turtle. Technically, they fall into the big family of freshwater turtles, but I'm not sure why, because the kind of the characteristics you look at with freshwater turtles, this guy doesn't have. Our wood turtles, for example, are also a very land-focused turtle, but they spend the winter underwater. You know, they base their operations around water, and that's one of the kind of the hallmarks of a terrapin or a freshwater turtle, is they do ruminate, kind of like hibernate underwater. The box turtle hibernates in burrows, so he'll have to dig down, get below the frost line, and hibernate deep underground. That's one thought of why we don't have a lot of box turtles in the state. If you've ever tried to dig, right? Yeah, you try to dig a hole here, it's rocks, 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 rocks. And these little guys aren't gopher tortoise. You know, he's not a great digger. So he's very limited in how deep underground he can get until he gets a little further south, a little deeper soils, a little higher frost line too. Just want to give you a good look at him. He's a neat little turtle. Notice that red eye. With the eastern box turtle, that red eye tells you if he's male or female. The boys have red eyes. The girls have kind of orangey brown eyes. And the brighter red his eyes are, the healthier he is. Yeah. So Mr. Box Turtle walking through the woods comes across Mrs. Box Turtle. She just gaze deeply into his eyes. She'll, it's like a fire truck. Oh. And she knows he's healthy, right? He's got those bright red eyes. She knows he's potentially going to help her make healthy baby turtles. If his eyes are kind of pink or brick color, something like that, she knows he's maybe not the ideal box turtle. I don't know what's happened to this guy, but his eyes have gone so red during our close down. I don't know what has changed. I feel like we're feeding him all the same food. But I just noticed his eyes are way brighter than they were a couple months ago. What do you think, Alyssa? Does it look different to you?
You know, I actually was thinking his eyes did look redder, and I thought maybe it was just my video. But
No, his eyes, I just noticed it actually. His eyes are crazy red.
maybe he likes the quiet. That somehow
maybe,
is.
Yeah. So box turtles get their name from something they can do that other turtles really can't. Most turtle shells are like this one. Oh, upside down. You've kind of got two parts to it. The top part is called the carapace. The bottom part is the plastron. You know, you get kind of good upper and lower armor. But this is a solid unit. You know, it doesn't flex, it doesn't bend. The box turtle has a hinged plastron. So if something bothers him, like say someone pokes him in the nose, what you eating there, buddy? You can close the door. Yeah, he has a back door too. Come on, dude. He never closes the back door. I don't know why. I poke at him, he's like, cut it out. I won't close it. And that's actually, it's good for us to not be able to get him to hide in his shell because it shows he's not afraid. If we do find a wild box turtle and you pick it up like this, that little guy is going to be in there tight. That shell is going to be, the door is going to be slammed shut. It really, you have to get a tool of some sort to pry that door open. I mean, they really can hold that very tight, and it's a great defense. You know, a box turtle this size, a bear maybe could crunch him. Otherwise, he doesn't have any predators now. If he can just get himself into that shell before somebody gets a hold of his leg or something, he's fine. The coyote's going to run around like a dog with a tennis ball, eventually get bored and put him down. So a great defense, really state-of-the-art in turtle defensive technology. questions?
What is the shell made out of?
Oh, nice. So the shell, oh, wait a minute. Haha. I have a busted shell right here. So this is another box turtle shell. And you look on the inside, you see that? See the lines that kind of the, well, horizontal lines there? Those are basically ribs. So a turtle's shell is made out of its skeleton. You know, you just think of like if your rib cage all kind of just connect all those ribs together and spread that out a bit, you've got a turtle shell. Then on the outside, there's a thin layer of tissue, kind of like skin. And then you've got these heavy scutes or these big thick scales on top of it. But you know, people used to carve their initials in their pet turtles, stuff like that. It's kind of like carving your initials on the side of your head kind of thing. I mean, they could feel that. And when you see a turtle, like cartoons and stuff all the time, right? Turtles are taking off their shells. They can't do that, yeah. An empty shell is a dead turtle, really. And so the turtle shell grows with it as it grows. You know, it's part of its skeleton. They don't have to trade shells or anything. And when he does this, now think about that, right? The shell is your rib cage. Didn't that just get kind of gross? Right? You just pull your head down into your chest cavity and your arms in there. I mean, that's messed up. But that is how the turtle do. So this is a neat little turtle. And again, he's something that last year I would have said, these don't live in Vermont. They do, definitely they're in Massachusetts, they're in coastal New Hampshire. But now there's really some thought that the Southern Connecticut River Valley could have once had box turtles. And potentially the box turtles that have been found there over the years have been part of a remnant population that could be bouncing back. All right.
So Mike, I know the wood turtles, when they're hunting for grubs, they'll sort of like push them or slap themselves down on the ground, almost like a chest bump to sort of bring the grubs up to the surface.
Yeah.
Do the box turtles do that, or is that specific to the wood turtles?
No, at least not that I've ever encountered that the box turtles do. That's, and usually when you hear about it with wood turtles, it's a big, you know, big bold print. Wow, look at this cool thing wood turtles do. Basically and this is something I just learned, if you want to bring worms to the surface for some reason, you can drive a wooden stake into the ground and scrape like a rough file up and down along the stake. And apparently that vibration causes the worms to come to the surface. And the thought is that the wood turtle slams its chest against the ground and creates the same effect. And those worms and night crawlers come up out from underground and the wood turtle eats them. Yeah. Don't know why it works, but it works for the wood turtle. Who we got left here? All right. Just noticed we're getting close to our hour, and I don't want to get in trouble for talking too much. We do have another animal to show you guys. She's like half awake in here. Here you go. So I used to work with a bunch of exotic animals, unwanted exotic pets for the most part. And it was great. I mean, those animals are fascinating. You know, we watch these nature documentaries on TV. We see incredible things, but they're almost always things we never will see in real life, right? You know, when we're doing programs with kids, a lot of times I might start off asking, what's your favorite animal? Did you guys catch that? The program. I didn't want to talk through it. You know, ask kids, what's your favorite animal? And they'll say lions, dolphins, you know, all these great animals that don't live here, right? They've learned about it from television, or maybe kids have gone to the zoo and seen it or something. The thing that I really love about the policy here at the museum of dealing with native wildlife is this week, if you all are driving around and keeping your eyes open, you will see a red-tailed hawk. I mean, really, you'll see a red-tailed hawk. If you're looking, it's almost impossible not to. They're all over the place. They love highways. They like open spaces. Next time you go to Hannaford, look up. You'll see them circling over the fields next to the Hannaford parking lot. They're there all the time. Right there at exit 3, there's a dark, almost black red-tailed hawk that hangs out there. A couple years ago, there was a blonde. So they're a bird that has some diversity in the way it looks. You can actually recognize the individuals. They're habitual, so they're going to be in the same spot, at least in the spring and summer. And they're big. I mean, look at her. She's a big bird. She has that nice light chest, so she'll stand out. She's easy to spot. And we can really see a red-tailed hawk in person doing a lot of the things that are the exciting part of the documentary on African birds of prey. You can see this bird dive down into the bushes and come out with a mouse. You can watch them soaring over our heads. We can get that real-life experience with really an awesome bird. Red-tailed hawks are like the owl. They're a raptor. So she has great big powerful feet for catching her food. She has that hook-shaped beak for cutting it up. And she's also one of the best at something hawks are famous for. Yeah, right here. If you want to see the animal with possibly the best daytime vision in the world, it's right here. Go for a drive on the highway. You will see the best daytime eyeballs in the world. They figure her vision is somewhere around 8 to 10 times sharper than ours. That lets her pick out a mouse half a mile away. And they know the half a mile away from watching hawks do straight line flights to a mouse half a mile down the road. The 8 to 10 times our detail vision comes from taking apart their eyes and looking at the density of the light sensing and the detail sensing cones and rods in their eyes. And that's really the neat thing about it, because it's not a telescope. She's not zooming in on that mouse half a mile down the road. She has enough detail vision, enough resolution in her eyesight to pick out that level of detail. So if you all were here in the room with me right now, she'd be looking at every individual hair in each of your eyebrows. She's looking at your pores from across the room. And it's just that insane level of detail. So it's everybody's pores, not just zooming in on Sarah. I mean, really, it's everybody. And when she looks out across the field, she's seeing all those blades of grass and the grasshopper and the mouse and the gum wrapper blowing across it. She's seeing all that detail all at once. It's just mind-blowing. It's an incredible animal that is so commonly seen if we just look for it. And that's really the thing when we think about Vermont Wildlife. There's no nature series, Wildlife on Discovery Channel, right? I mean, Curiosity Stream doesn't have a series on animals in Vermont. And I think it often makes us feel like we don't have anything cool here. But even the incredibly common red-tailed hawk is an amazing animal. It's an incredible animal. And then you get into some of the rock stars, right? Like a moose. And, the peregrine falcon, the fastest animal on the planet, lives here. We've got some great wildlife in our backyard. Frogs that freeze solid. And so hopefully you guys have enjoyed meeting a few of them. And I want to make sure if there's any questions, please ask them. We can talk about other stuff besides the animals I brought with me today. If you want, I'll do my best for those.
Hey, Mike, how did she come to you?
Oh, yeah. So this bird was also hit by a car. She's another local girl. She was hit in Vernon. And a guy came home from work one day and she was sitting on his front porch with a broken wing. So they brought her to a wildlife rehabilitator. He was unable to fix the wing. So you see how actually, here, this way you see it better. She's got a shark fin going there. Yeah, the wing twisted and healed completely wrong. She's not able to fly at all. We actually just, she's been living alone for quite a while. And we just got another red-tailed hawk that hopefully we're spending some time with him right now, but hopefully they'll get along and be roommates here in the near future.
Yay.
When
So-
birds get injured like that and like can't fly anymore, but it heals, do they like feel pain still, or do you know anything about that?
It's so hard to say. And in general, wild animals, and really, she was a wild hawk when she got hit. They don't want you to know they're in pain. You know, if they're out in the wild crying out, you know, like, oh no, someone pay attention to me, I'm hurt. All the wrong animals are going to pay attention to you then. It's going to be like a dinner bell for the local cats and coyotes and everybody else. So they really do try to hide it. In the past, we had a hawk that had a similar wing injury, and we noticed that, especially in the spring, on a real sunny day, she would lay it out on the rocks, like putting heat on it, I think. You know, she was laying it down on those warm rocks. So we figured that must bother her. It must have bothered that bird. But again, it's so hard to tell. You know, you watch their behavior, you watch their overall attitude, and if they don't seem to be wrong, it's really the best we can do.
Yeah, how do you acclimate these like wild animals and get them used to, you know, being handled and yeah.
Sure. Well, the ones that take the most work are the birds. I mean, really, the snakes and the snakes, you just have to be willing to get bit a few times, and eventually they get used to it. The turtles, if they don't like it, they just hide in their shell, and eventually they get used to it. In the past, we've used basically falconry training with the birds, which is, it's very food-based, very much, you're gonna sit on the glove and this is where you're gonna eat. With this new hawk, we're trying something different. It's called non-compulsory training, where and I don't know, it's definitely slower. I've discovered that. It's my first attempt at it. Things are definitely moving much slower than falconry training. But it's much more trying to slowly build trust completely on the bird's terms. And for a wild animal, there's a lot to overcome there. You know, we are the scariest thing on the planet, really. And to get a wild animal, especially one that's been through wildlife rehabilitation, which has got to be like an alien abduction, to get that animal on its own terms to decide it wants to sit on your glove and go see a bunch of kindergartners. It's new for me, but we are making some very slow progress with this new red-tailed hawk.
Can you just speak just a little bit more about that non-compulsory training, like what that entails, like what
Sure.
yeah.
And really, this is going to be a weird thing to have recorded for posterity. And again, this is my first attempt at this type of training. I've been working with birds of prey for over 20 years, and all along it's been kind of a combination of like operant conditioning and general socialization and falconry techniques, kind of a hybrid there. And it works very well, but it's all, you know, it's pretty much all on my terms. It's like, bird, you are going to do this, get used to it. And it works great. This, I guess, non-compulsory training is much more, it seems to be, I'm going to spend a ton of time sitting near you until you get used to me sitting near you. And if you want to go away from me, I am not going to chase you. When we get the bird to the point that it's used to me, then we're going to try to encourage it by, you know, to eat near me, and then to eat near the glove, and then to eat on the glove. But if the bird, like say with falconry, if the bird doesn't eat on the glove, the bird doesn't eat that day. Whereas with this, if the bird doesn't eat on the glove, okay, you can still eat. It's just you don't have to eat on the glove. And as I understand it, someday the bird will go, oh yeah, sure, I'll eat on the glove. You seem cool. And yesterday morning, I was complaining to one of our volunteers about how slow this process is. And then last night, I want to say, but it was really a late afternoon yesterday, the bird, something clicked. And it was neat to see it, where the bird went from, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? To, you want me to eat that? Oh. You know, it was, and I don't know if I'm characterizing that correctly, but there definitely was a moment where something changed with the bird, where it went from being very like, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? To, all right, I'm starting to get this, you know, and he just kind of calmed, which was neat to see, especially since I've been complaining earlier that morning that I was just going to give up on it. So it's been very interesting. And in theory, it will create a different type of education bird. You know, it's going to create, whereas I'll often say with these birds that have been trained through this more falconry techniques, this is their job. You know, right now she's on the clock. And when this program's over, she's going to be happy, right? Just like when we get out of work, you're like, woohoo! I can turn the computer off. No more Zoom meetings today. I'm done. Done with work. In theory, this new training technique, we're going to have a bird that wants to do programs. There's like, oh, all right, we're going to program. Let's go. You know, they're going to be excited about it. In theory. So we'll see how it all plays out. It's definitely interesting, you know, for me to be learning a new trick here.
I don't know if this red tail is a very good example of a bird that doesn't want to go to programs, because she's kind of a ham.
She's a rock star. Yeah, she's great. And, you know, that's the thing too, that, you know, the saying that like a non-coercive makes this look coercive. And it comes across, I think it can come across worse than maybe it really is. Because if this bird really had a problem with this, you'd all be able to tell. You know, she'd be panting, she'd be trying to jump away. And we have birds that don't do certain programs because they don't want to. You know, we're not that extreme with it. Whereas like, say we're going to go, I don't know, let's say to a library, Jill. And you know, it's going to be a smaller group and it's going to be relaxed. We might have some birds that are less tolerant of crowds that can go to that one and be fine. Whereas this bird, I mean, if there were any fairs this summer, she would be on a perch all day, like at the Heritage Cove Wildlife Festival, or she would have gone to Mutton and Mead Renaissance Fair, which is just 2 days of total chaos. It would have been great the whole time. So, you know, we do definitely see individual differences in the birds, I think, that goes beyond the training technique.
Are there differences like day to day with the birds? Like some days they just don't want to do a program while other days
sure.
They're fine?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just like anybody, right? You know, you have good days, you have bad days. Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question. I was wondering, what advice you have for people if they come across a red-tailed hawk with a broken wing, or you find a bird of prey that's injured. Like, what do you suggest? And it doesn't look like a horrible injury. What do you suggest the average person do?
Well, you want to get it to someone who knows what they're doing as quickly as possible. So around here, the Vermont, New Hampshire Vet Clinic is a good place to call. Fred Homer is a wildlife rehabber in Williamsville. Over across the river in Winchester, New Hampshire, there's the Winchester Wildlife Rehab Center. And then even our local, Kelly Price, the local game warden, he's really good too about getting animals where they need to be. But a lot of times, not so much with a hawk, but like say someone finds a robin out of the nest or something, they want to keep it and take care of it themselves. A lot of times more harm than good will come of that. getting it to someone who can help it as quickly as possible increases the chances it won't end up here. You know, it'll end up out in the wild, which is better, way better.
Mike, when you say get it somewhere, how do you safely, like if I come across a red-tailed hawk on the side of the road, how do I safely get that bird from the side of the road to Vermont, New Hampshire? Or do I not do that? Do I stand in the middle of the road and stop traffic until somebody else gets there?
I was just going to ask Sarah if she wanted that information too, actually. And I think, Alyssa, in your case, you should stand in the middle of the road and stop traffic for as long as it takes. I think that would be a fun story to hear about later. But if you're going to collect the bird yourself, the thing you want to watch out for with a raptor, you know, whether it's a hawk or an owl, are the feet. This hawk is strong, well, any of them are strong enough to drive the talons in as deep as the talons are long. A big red-tailed hawk like this one can break bones when she grabs a rabbit. You know, so that means the bones in your hand are at risk if those talons come together on those bones. So the feet are their weapons. The beaks are sharp, but they're not a big deal, really. So you want to be very aware of those feet. Probably if you've got it, the best thing to do is throw a light jacket or towel or blanket or something over the bird's head so it can't see you coming. You know, again, vision is their #1 sense. So you cover up their head so they can't see what's going on. That'll make it easier for you to maneuver. It also calms the bird down. And then you just scoop them up and try to get them contained in some way. I mean, in a box if you've got one. You know, I'm saying all these things that I'm sure everybody has in their car. But, you know, if you've got some sort of box you can put it in. I actually stuck a red-tailed hawk in a reusable grocery bag, you know, one of those grocery totes once. You know, just something to keep the bird contained so it's not flapping around inside your car. Sometimes people will just hold the bird on their lap. The big downside to that is you are risking getting holes put in yourself, of course. But also that's going to be really stressful for the bird, right? You know, imagine your alien abduction, right? You're being restrained by aliens while they take you to whatever they're going to do to you. You don't know. Whereas if the bird is in a box in the back seat and it's dark and relatively quiet, that stress level is going to be way down. And then, yeah, get it help as quickly as you can. If you've got some heavy gloves, that's also going to be great for handling a bird like this. On the other side of that, though, if you're like a water bird, like a heron or a loon, you want to watch their beaks. I mean, their beaks are very dangerous. I just read an article about a bald eagle that was killed by a loon.
Wow.
Yeah, a loon speared it in the chest with its beak and killed it. And there's a story, I don't know, it's like a rural version of an urban legend of, I've heard this story in 3 different states. And some guy or a game warden was killed by a great blue heron he was trying to help. And this story had a lot of different variations, but the core line of the story was whoever the person was trying to pull the bird up out of the water, and it speared him in the head, and speared him right in the eye and killed him. So that's possible. You know, do I think that's a true story? I don't know, but it is possible that could happen. Are you getting done? There you go. So you want to watch the beaks with those big water birds. And then like a duck can't hurt you. A songbird really can't hurt you. So, I mean, they pinch. Those little chickadees are the worst. But all right, how's that for rescuing birds on the side of the road? Okay, cool. And again, get it to professional help as quickly as you can. All right, guys. Any other questions? No? Well,
Thank you.
all very much. I hope you enjoyed
Thank you.
critters and beautiful weather this week. Get outside and see some real ones.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Alyssa and Casey. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you.
I'll see you later.
Yeah, see ya.